Hello, today I want to go over some highlights of Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is kind of got two big parts that I think of. One is kind of a discussion of general ideas about purchasing strategies for consumers, and specifically thinking about the purchase of motor vehicles, which for most people, with the exception of your house purchase, your car, or probably over a series of years, several cars would be the largest thing you spend money on. This slide contains bullet points that in some ways relates to just kind of a basic econ class, and this personal finance class touches on some of these economic ideas. In particular, when you make purchasing decisions, this is one of the big themes if you take Introduction to Microeconomics. When you make decisions, you're actually, there's trade-offs involved. If you buy one thing, you're not buying another. And it seems obvious, but it has almost everything you do. In fact, I would actually say everything you do involves trade-offs. And that idea is one of the deep economic ideas once you fully internalize it. And the sooner you start realizing that, the sooner you'll make better financial choices. The thing that complicates our evaluation of trade-offs is we are inundated with marketing by firms, pressure from friends, social pressure, that shape our buying habits, and sometimes these buying habits are not in our best financial interest. I want to return to a theme that I've spoken about several times in the class, and that is if you want to become financially stable, financially secure, the way that 99% of the people do it is by spending less than your income. That's the formula for almost everyone. That's true for Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Ultimately, you need to spend less than you earn, and being a good buyer is a way to achieve that. The other thing is there's a lot of pressure for you to overspend, and one way you can overspend is by taking advantage or misusing credit. So you have credit debt, and you want to try to avoid that. So I'm going to talk about 4 stages of a buying decision, and you can think this is a major purchasing. So you can think of, in this chapter, it's going to be applied to cars, but you can think of this as kind of durable purchases you're going to make: a refrigerator, a washer, dryer, air conditioner, things that you're going to need. These are big purchases. The first stage is you need to identify exactly what the problem is. It may be that your car could be repaired instead of purchasing a new one, or the washing machine could be repaired for $150 and it'll work just fine, rather than spending $600 for a new one. You need to gather information both about new purchases or repairing existing items that can serve what you need. The second stage, you need to evaluate your alternatives, and that is doing a price analysis of various items that you might purchase, comparison shop, learn about the products. The third stage will be to select and purchase your product. Depending on where you buy the product, you may be able to negotiate the price. And again, it depends on the item and where you buy from. Most places you buy a car, you're able to negotiate, but certainly not all. In the past, actually, there was a lot more negotiation over appliance prices. That's actually a little less common now, as more and more appliances are sold through companies like Lowe's and Home Depot, and Sears, where prices are more or less fixed. And then there's a set of post purchase things you need to think about, like maintenance, ongoing cost of operations. And if you have a problem with a device, or in the case your car, you might have to resolve purchasing issues like it's a defective product. The chapter specifically focuses on the idea of what do you do when you buy a motor vehicle. And this is a really expensive decision. So I want to encourage you all to read the chapter that is full of a lot of good ideas, and try to internalize some of these ideas so when you go buy a car, you'll make better choices. Number one, you really have to think about what you can afford. And I guess similar to that, although not the same, you need to ask yourself, what do you need? And in particular, you may not need the $40,000 maxed out car. You may be able to get by on a more budget car. So you might go with a Toyota Corolla instead of a really high-end Toyota Camry, or a basic Honda Civic instead of a really nice Honda Accord. You really need to think about what you can afford, and then really think hard about what you need. What do you actually need? Related to this question is you have to wrestle with the idea of buying new versus a used car. When you buy a new car, the day that you drive it off the lot, most estimates are that you lost 20% of the price. And that is, if you want to go sell the car within a few days of purchasing it, you will get 20% less than you paid for it. So if you spend $40,000 for a car and you decide you have to sell it within a few months, you're going to probably only be able to get something like $32,000 or $33,000. You'll have lost $7,000 or $8,000. Buying used cars, especially a used car with low mileage from a reliable car company, is often a really, really good choice, especially for younger buyers who are early in their savings period. You have to make a decision. We'll talk a little bit about buying versus leasing. In most circumstances, for students or young people first working, there's a lot of advantages to buying. Leases are not that attractive unless you own a business. You need to learn about how to determine what is a good car, and that means what defines good. I'm not a supercar person. My wife and I rely heavily on consumer reports, right? We let other people evaluate cars and tell us what to look for and what cars are reliable and what features are important. You're going to need to find a resource that you can trust. And then you're going to have to think about where you do buy a car. You can buy new or used cars, typically from a new car dealer. And there's also, if you're buying used cars, you can go to a used car dealer or a private sale. There are pros and cons to each option. So a big question that you'll have to wrestle with is whether you lease versus buy. So let's say that in the last 20 years, leasing has become far more prevalent than it was previous. And the reason is car companies realize that they make more money when they lease you a car than when they sell you a car. And that seems odd, because when you're in the new car dealer, the way it would be presented to you is that you're going to be able to, by leasing, have a smaller cash outflow, the smaller down payment than if you buy a car. You're going to have lower monthly payments than if you buy a car. And when you lease, you have kind of records that come with the lease that are convenient if you are deducting the car for business purposes. I want to emphasize leasing is that third point is very important. very attractive part of a lease. You can also do it if you own a car, but leasing is quite attractive when you have a business and you're using your car for business. And the car dealer then will be able to tell you that the smaller down payment required, the lower monthly payments, would allow you to buy a nicer, more expensive car than if you buy. So it easily could be the conversation is where you are, you could buy a Honda Civic or you can lease a Honda Accord. And it's awfully attractive. But don't be deceived, because the big disadvantage of a lease is that you actually don't own the car. So at the end of your 3-year lease, which is a typical lease period, you have to return the car, and you are then confronted with, again, of the problem of either buying a car at that point or leasing another car. In addition, the leases have relatively modest mile allowances. So it's typical that you can drive a leased car on average for $10,000 to $12,000 miles, a year. So you would, for instance, on a 3-year lease, you cannot drive a car more than 36,000 miles, or they charge you a charge per extra mile, and it becomes extremely expensive when you go over these mileage allowances. So if you're going to drive very far to and from work, or regularly see yourself using your car for vacations, a lease is probably going to be way more expensive than the dealer's telling you, because of these when you turn it back in, huge mile charges. And because you don't have ownership interest, the car dealers like it, because you're basically always paying for a car. And that is, you're leasing a car, let's say, for 3 years. And when you turn that car in, you're going to go and engage, they're hoping, in a new lease. And then when that lease is done, you'll sign yet another lease. So that's kind of attractive. You're always going to be driving a fairly new car, 1, 2, or 3-year-old car. But it also means you're basically making a monthly payment for a car. If you buy a car after typically 3, 4, or 5 years is a typical car loan period, or if you're able to save enough money and just pay for the car in cash, that might be more likely if you're buying a used car. But at the end, let's say, of a 4-year car loan, you own the car. You're no longer making monthly payments. Okay, and if you hold on to that car, let's just say a typical holding period might be 10 years. That means the last 6 years of owning the car, you didn't make payments to a dealer. So while there was a larger deposit and you had larger monthly payments while you were making the payments, you're not in the cycle of constantly making lease payments to the dealer. I personally am not a huge fan of leases. Again, I can see where it fits in the marketplace, but there are many consumers that are, I think, overly seduced by the low monthly payments, not realizing that they're actually signing up for a much longer period of time of making payments for a car. So I think you should be very cautious about leasing versus buying. Unlike many, in fact, most things that you purchase, cars, typically you're able to bargain. And so the sticker price on a car is the suggested retail price. Only cars that are extremely popular in the market, so where there's very, very limited supply compared to demand, will you pay the retail price. So typically you pay less than the retail price. The invoice price is the dealer's cost, or an approximation. In fact, most studies I've read is even the invoice price is typically larger than the dealer's true cost. The dealers get extra bonuses every quarter, depending upon how many cars they sell. Those bonuses are not reflected in the invoice price. So, for instance, they might get an extra $300 per car from the car dealer if they sell more than 100 cars that quarter, something like that. And that comes to them later, and it's not part of the invoice price. 3 really good resources for new cars are learning about new and used cars. Consumer Reports is just tremendous resource for car reviews. Edmunds is a very, very reliable and, again, very solid reviews of cars. Last time we purchased a car, I looked at this place called TrueCar. TrueCar differs from Edmunds in that they have more information about local prices. That is, they're able to give you a better idea, say, of car prices in New Jersey as compared to, say, in North Carolina. There may be prices in North Carolina for, let's say, for instance, the Subaru might be lower than in New Jersey, where there is more snowy driving and Subarus are more popular. TrueCar will reflect that kind of state-by-state differences. When you're bargaining for a new car, know that you are basically competing against someone who does this type of negotiation almost every day. And for many of you, you will buy, 1, 2, 3, 4 cars your entire life. You might not, you're not buying a car typically regularly. And a car salesman, at least the good ones, are selling cars every week. They often want to know if you're going to have a trade-in, right? Because a trade-in, again, what that means in their mind is they might tell you a better price for the car, knowing that they're going to give you a very poor trade-in value. They also might want to ask you about dealer financing. Again, this is a way for them to make money off you. So offer an attractive price, but then have more expensive financing if you indicate you're going to finance. So what I recommend is, say you're not sure about trading in. You might trade in, but you haven't made a decision yet. And wait until you've negotiated the price of the car, and then you can negotiate the trade-in value. You do not need to trade in your car to the company that you buy from. You can trade in your car to a different company. In particular, used car dealers are on the market to buy new cars. And so you can always sell your car to someone else if the new car dealer doesn't give you a good price on the trade-in. But that's important to separate the new car price from the trade-in. The situation in a car dealership definitely puts a new car buyer at a disadvantage. I actually recommend, there's a number of books, if you go to your local public library, that you can learn about, to educate yourself before you go buy a car, about tactics used by new car dealers. They're not all terrible people, but I mean, their job is to try to get as much money from you, and you may think that paying slightly more for lunch, say $4.50 instead of $4, is not that big a deal. But when you're buying a car, you end up paying $23,000 when you could have bought it for $21,000. That's a big difference. Again, the salesmen are regularly engaged in this kind of activity. You're really at a disadvantage in experience. They want you to become emotionally attached to the car. So remember, when you're shopping for cars, there's a lot of cars that are comparable to even the one that you settled on. So let's suppose, again, you're thinking of buying a Chevy Malibu. There's a variety of cars. Ford has a comparable car, Honda, Toyota, Nissan, Mazda. They all have cars that are in that category. And again, if the Consumer Reports reports cars, bundles them together, and these are like a set of similar cars with similar features. Don't fall in love with the car, because you have a dealer that will not negotiate on a price. You need to be willing to leave and buy a car that's from a different company that may not be exactly that model, but it's going to be very similar. They often like to ask, how much are you looking to spend? So if you say, well, I can afford $200 a month, right? That's more information that allows them to say, extend the car loan from 4 years to 6 years as a way to get you under the $200 a month loan payment that you want and get you into a more expensive car. So remember, what do you really need out of your car? How much can you afford? Okay. And when they ask me how much are you looking to spend, I would say I'm looking to get the best possible deal that I can. Okay. And what does that mean? It's like, okay, you tell me what price you can offer me for that car, and I'll make a decision. But at this point, I'm really shopping for the best possible deal. Before you buy the car, you really need to gather a lot of information. So what I recommend is if you're buying a car, if it's not an emergency situation where you must get a car in 3 days because you're basically stranded and can't get to work, your car breaks. I recommend that you spend some time looking and shopping, and that is set aside these car dealers. These are usually longer days. You should probably set aside 2, 3, or 4 days and go to a variety of car dealers, test drive, look, get a sense, and then go back and do a lot of homework on the websites, Consumer Reports, Edmunds, for instance, and then try to do some negotiation. Go to one dealer and then set in your mind what's the highest price you can pay and be ready to walk out. I want to emphasize, when you buy a car, the last thing the car dealer wants is you to walk out of, let's say, the Toyota dealership and go down the street to the Ford dealership. Toyota knows if you leave his showroom, there's a good chance you're not coming back. So you're ready to leave. And even if you decide to come back, again, you're not tied. You may say, well, I wanted to look again. I wanted to see if you guys have come down on your price, But it's really important in cars that you don't get emotionally attached. These are really expensive purchases. And try to have the level-headed approach when you're purchasing. Luck.